Eduardo, we were just talking off air that I think this is the third time you've been on the show. I always, for some reason, for me, because I think too often on social media. I feel like I've spoken to people more often than I have. I just spoke to James Hoffman. It had been 2 years since he'd been on the show. It's like, I don't feel like it's been that long. But it's great to have you back. And I certainly appreciate it because for the listeners, you should be ultra appreciative because Eduardo is not 100%. He's been quite unwell, but managed to get in a full body workout this morning, right?
No, yes. Thanks again for having me on. That's a third time. I really don't recall the last time I was here, but yeah, it's been a tough week. I have been sick the whole week. I'm still some stuff nose. But yeah, I managed to work out this morning, feeling so much better than being at home, just drinking water, resting. Yes, and thanks for inviting me once more, man.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine I can only think back to when I was at university and we had, I don't know if you guys have the same thing. We have like a freshers week, like you're fresh, you're new, and you basically go out and party every single day. And there was a thing called a freshers flu and it just like
Yeah.
knocked everyone out. But I guess when you're getting barely any sleep, drinking tons of alcohol, and probably not really eating very well, your immune system is just tanked and setting you up for just feeling terrible. But
Oh
I
yeah.
imagine sickness is quite common on campus.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I heard from students there is something going around. So many students getting sick. Was feeling a little weird Monday, and yeah, so I pretty much went home Monday and came back today Friday. I was pretty much at home, feeling really sick, but so much better now.
And I think, again, the listeners will be able to relate. You're just saying how you just don't feel yourself when you don't move your body and train and get something done. It just feels like, you kind of need to rest because your body's telling you to do that. But at the same time, I don't know if it's more psychological. You feel like you need to kind of get in there and move some weight.
Yes, it was funny because Wednesday I went for a walk and I almost died. When I came back, I was feeling even worse because I don't know, man, exercise, it's more mental for me at this point. Like it makes me feel so much better, ready to go for my life and all the things I need to do. So then I was like, again after that walk, I was feeling worse and like, oh man, I'm missing moving my body and doing. So then, yes, it was so much better. Like, come on, I gotta try a little workout this morning, and I did a. I'm very free weight guy. Like, I go for pull ups, deadlift, squat, bench, dips. And today was like 2 sets, only machines, 3 R&R. But yeah, I managed to work out and feeling so much better. So I was missing badly hitting the weights and working out, moving the body. So yeah, hope that speeds up my recovery.
You sound so not like a science-based lifter, Eduardo, doing all your free weights. Have you not seen? You probably have seen them because you're on social media a bit. But the foam roller through the arm and then doing kind of cable movements, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
like for clicks and engagement and jokes, or if these people are serious. Part of me doesn't even care at this point.
I I really don't know either, man. I and usually I come across for those things that people send me or tag me and like yeah, it's yeah, we can get into that social media debate. I changed my mind completely about that type of engagement or the discussions and debates I would engage. Honestly, it's like my explanations and my reasoning can only go as far as the listener framework and cognition capacity allow them. And it's waste of my time. It's waste of energy because the most people they just want to convey their points and their beliefs rather than to listen to something different from their perspective. So yeah, so I can only go as far as someone's framework allow them to do, and I'm not engaging those debates on social media anymore. So that's something. It's time is my biggest asset at this point. I gonna choose carefully where I'm gonna put my time and my effort at this point.
Yeah, I think anyone who has spent any amount of time on social media and trying to put out educational content have had then people criticize and leave comments. And I'm the same as you, Eduardo. I'm always like, oh, I can educate them, they can learn, and we can have a back and forth discussion. But it never goes the direction you want it to. They aren't open to
No,
changing their mind. They aren't listening. They've already made their mind up by making the comment. So I definitely think you're doing the right thing by just being like, hey, just not engaging in it, and hopefully more long form content like this is more worth your time, where the people that are open to listening and changing their mind and learning something new will actually tune into it.
yeah, and I appreciate you and so many others is still fighting the good fight and trying to educate people because it's not easy, especially on social media environment, right? Is people are like you said, they made up their ideas, their conceptual models about how things work, and they don't want to listen or change their mind about it. It's complicated.
Yeah, you kind of wish you could sit with them like this and have a discussion, which are
Yeah,
always actually very fruitful when two people come on and actually are able to talk back and forth. But yeah, via
yeah,
comments, and a lot of the people commenting, there's no way they'd come and join you for a chat. They'd be like, no, no, no. I know I'd get myself handed to me. I don't want that.
yeah. I don't know because the type of training I got and my mindset is always like if someone thinks different from me or the perspective is a little different, my mindset is always like where this person is coming from and why they think different from me, and I try to see what what I'm missing here, that they see that same subject in a different perspective than mine. But usually it's like you said, that's not how people approach discussions, because good discussions is when you learn at most, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I always think like there's no such thing as failing. It's kind of lessons, and if you keep going, then you've never failed, right? You're just keeping and learning. And I guess that's a bit of a topic for today because it's been a bit of a spicy one, if we can put it in that terminology, on social media. And that's part of the reason I wanted to bring you on, because you've been working very hard on a new study, and that comes down to a lot of the recent research that's come out on training volume. Probably the most notorious was the Pelland systematic review that came out last year, where they found a dose response relationship between volume and hypertrophy. But a lot of people were like, all this research coming out, great, but what about swelling? What about edema? What about that? Because surely muscle damage is increasing, people are getting more swelling, more kind of that edema as volume goes up. And hey, if this then confounds all the research, then hey, it's completely useless for us. So yeah, what have
Yeah,
you been working on, and what do you feel about those kind of comments now?
yeah. I like you said, I have been working on training volume and its effects on muscular adaptations, primarily hypertrophy and strength. Kind of try to understand that dose response relationship. And I think very interesting. The whole thing about swelling uh, the, actually started with the infamous 52 sets paper we published. So that's when it was when people started to say, "Oh, it's all edema, it's all swelling," and using both interchangeably. There's also something in the new paper we try to correct this as well. So the whole thing started before Pallen's meta regression. Was pretty much with Allison 52 sets paper, and then we had a we still. I think you know my position. I see some limitations on both side of the camps, low volume and high volume. I'm still thinking when it comes to high volume, we still scratching the surface. The case is not closed whatsoever, in my opinion, and I can expand on that later. But the whole thing was a the only reason we seeing higher volume studies demonstrating more muscle growth was because is edema, swelling, something like that. It's not actual muscle hypertrophy. That was the rationale or the critique behind the high volume studies. So for the starter, right? If that was true, that would be a system. When you're measuring things, we deal with two different types of a measurement error. We have a random that the things can go, you can measure muscle size and get a little bigger measurement or a little smaller, is the random variation associated with the measurement. And you can have a systematic error. And systematic error is the type of error that always would shift the measurement in one direction. In that case, if that would be systematic, in every high volume study would see more muscle growth, and that's not the case. So again, I think the first leaping logic here is assuming that it's something systematic, and all the studies that manipulate or try to investigate the effects of high, moderate, and low, they found positive findings favoring high volume. And again, that's not the case. So the data was actually collected back in 2016. And we try to be as honest as possible. I'm gonna share some behind the curtain with that paper. So we try to be as honest as possible with our previous goal and hypothesis. The idea was back in 2016, we were still discussing, does muscle damage play a role in hypertrophy, or does swelling play a role in hypertrophy? The idea was to see if low, moderate, and high volume training sessions would get the muscle more swollen. And if that swollen was that swollen persisted for 42, 72 hours, that would probably be an indicator of muscle damage. So the idea was, do different training volumes get the muscle more swollen, and how long that lasts? The idea was to investigate this. So then we had within crossover design, so the same participants undergoing the 3 different experimental sessions, which was 7 sets per week, or 7 sets per. I have been studying so much sets per week, but was in that case was sets per training session. So have a 7 sets distributed across squat, leg press, and knee extension. Then 14 sets distributed across the same exercises, squat, leg press, and knee extension, and then 21 sets. So that was the idea. Every experimental session separated by 1 week. And then they performed. We look at the acute change in muscle thickness. We look at perceptual assessments such as perceived exertion and perceived recovery. And we also look at the strength performance. So that's pretty much the effects of a 7, 14, 21 sets on those parameters in acute fashion. So the guys were highly trained. They were able to squat for 10 reps, almost 3 plates on average. So it was kind of a pretty strong individuals. And we randomized. So that means one participant could go for, during the first session, the 7, the second, the 14 and 21. Someone could start for 21, 7, and then 14 sets per session. And that was the first critique of the paper. I'm gonna summarize the paper, then we can get into the intricates and the critiques behind the paper. So the idea, and then what we found was that and something we differentiate in the paper, that swelling is, that's important to say, swelling short-lived. Swelling subsides in 24 hours. Swelling is the pump, so to speak. So it is more as a product of perfusion, reperfusion of the muscle, and the changing in metabolites that will produce some osmotic change that would draw water inside the muscle, that is swelling, and that subsides within 24 hours. When it comes to edema, and like I said, people use both interchangeably. Both you get the muscle swollen or make the muscle thicker or bigger, but one is short-lived because pretty much is a product of perfusion, reperfusion, and osmotic change associated with a metabolite change inside the muscle that draws water. The muscle gets the pump after the training. This is it. You get a shower, you know it's gone real soon. That's a swelling. So when you have a microstructure damage, that exercise inducing damage, and now we also have a damage being also very more biochemical as well, a cascade of chemical events associated with a damage that will make the muscle swollen, but pretty much because of inflammation caused by the exercise inducing damage that lasts 42, 72 hours. So the idea was to see whether or not those sessions would cause swelling or edema, right? So then we separate those two things. We also said that ultrasound cannot detect the difference between those two, but based on the knowledge we gained with ultrasound, its time course kind of allows us to understand if you're talking about exercise-induced swelling or exercise-inducing damage. The classic work from Priscilla Clarkson and Ken Osaka with a muscle damage, they saw that when they had exercise-inducing damage, the muscle thickness increased by 42, 72 hours. So again, and when there is no damage, that swelling subsides within 24 hours. So that was pretty much the rationale behind the paper. The only new thing we added was the measurement part, that a lot of people assuming that if you do high volume, that would cause something inside the muscle, a swelling or damage that would last 48 or 72 hours, inflating the measurements of muscle hypertrophy. That was the critique, and that's the part we added in the paper. And yes, it's a acute paper. We can't extrapolate acute findings to chronic, but I think in that case is even better because in acute fashion, you get like an amplified response because we even have a data in untrained. The muscle gets more swollen with the same novice or like a novice bout, not novel, like a novel bout of resistance training. The muscle gets more swollen, but when you repeat it, that bout gets like obturated. The swelling is way lower. So we also see, so that's, I think the acute response is even better because you're getting an amplified response. Because if you keep repeating that, the muscle gets less and less swelling. So what we found was that regardless the volume per session, the change in muscle thickness increased by immediately post the session, regardless the session, and went back to baseline. There is no statistical difference 24 hours post the exercise. We didn't see any increase in 48 and 72 hours. Because some people like, yeah, sometimes the muscle, the damage spikes in 48.2 or 72. A lot of people use the creatine kinase that the timeline is completely different from muscle swelling. And again, one of the most problematic measurements is CK creatine kinase. So again, we didn't see how the volume increased the swelling post, no differences between the volume per session. 24 hours was not statistical different from baseline already, and the same for 48 and 72 hours. That's about swelling. We also calculate the minimal detectable change, so we can see the individual results, responses. More people kind of went more people in higher volume. So when the higher volume, had more people going above the minimal detectable change. But again, everything subside within 24 hours. So the echo intensity pretty much followed the same pattern, increased right after, and went back within 24 hours. So the other variables were quite interesting. The the perceived recovery was the lowest and kept the lower throughout the whole time points for the 21 sets. So they perceived less recovery, but that's a tricky part because the way we measure performance, because we know when you have a damage, strength drops or performance drops, right? You can't perform the same way when the muscle is damaged. So we repeated, we set the 10 RM load for the individuals, and then we set the load, and 24 hours, 48, and 72, they had to repeat that to failure. So again, I don't know if the lower perceived recovery is a product of the people, participants, repeating that. So they repeated that assessment 3 days back to back, although for just one set, but after performing 7, 14, or 21 sets. I don't know if that might be a reason for that, but recovery was the lowest for 21 sets compared to 7. No difference between 14 and 21 sets. So per session, but the 21 compared to 7 was lower and always lower throughout 72 hours. And the exertion was higher for 21 compared to 7, but was not different between 21 sets per session and 14. And something that surprised us was that the strength performance never dropped. It actually increased by 24, and I think all the time points were different from baseline, with no differences between 72 hours and 48. So to reconcile everything, there was no indication of muscle damage whatsoever. Regardless the session, the volume per session, we have a acute effect immediately post that went back to baseline with 24 hours. And the strength didn't go down, which is another indicator there was no damage. Perceived recovery was different, with a 21 set condition demonstrating lower recovery throughout all the time points, lower recovery than 7 sets, no difference between 21 and 14, and exertion always the highest for 21 compared to 7 sets, but no difference between 21 and 14. I know it's a lot. I don't know if you were able to follow. Let me know if I need to repeat something or something was not clear.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic, Eduardo. I was just thinking that the swelling versus edema was a good thing to just kind of help people kind of communicate that more clearly, as in swelling short term, edema is more long term. So that swelling is, like you said, the pump. And
Yep.
to be clear, was the swelling then kind of the pump greater? Did it scale with set volume? Did you measure that in the like before the 24-hour measurement?
No, it was not. We measure baseline immediately post,
Oh, right.
24, 24, 48, and 72 hours post the session. If I was a 7, 14, or 21, and
So,
no statistical differences.
okay.
We cannot say that 21 produced more swelling than 14. There is no statistical difference there.
Yeah.
There was a
It's
time.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There
Which
is a,
we
sorry.
talk about train individuals, and that's something we pointed out. Yes, train individuals, they do experience muscle damage, but the magnitude is lower. So, and most of the studies, when you talk about exercise inducing damage, the intervention, the goal is to produce damage. What we tried to do was the 7, 14, and 21 sets was more hypertrophy oriented. So they started off 90% of their 10 RM load. So again, they were doing like they started the first set with a 2-3 R&R, depending on the individual. And then they kept performing, and some people failed, especially for more sets, they fail more. But usually we drop the weight to keep the target rep range. So we didn't produce the idea was not to produce not to create a session that would be exercise inducing damage. It's like in those studies, when you are studying training volume, the effects of high, moderate, or low, those are actual training sessions that supposed to mimic what people do on a daily basis when they're training for hypertrophy. It's not exercise inducing damage protocol. So that was the idea. Like when they are doing 7, 14, 21 sets in the hypertrophy oriented protocol, does that cause swelling and damage or both? That was the answer we sought to, the question we sought to answer.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I was bringing up the kind of immediately post swelling measurement was some people, and myself included, I've at times used kind of my perceived pump as a bit of a proxy of, has this muscle had like a good go in
Uh-huh.
terms of like how's the volume treating it. So it's just interesting to hear that you measured that, and the low volume versus quite literally a lot more volume group didn't see any kind of measurable difference there. So
No,
that's
no
interesting. And then the perceived differences in terms of perceived recovery score and the RPEs, I guess to me makes sense in that it's scaled with volume. But then I guess the take home or the big news in regards to my question with them, kind of the confounder of edema within the measurement and
yeah.
damage doesn't seem, at least this study would suggest, it doesn't seem it's likely to be as much of a concern, at least.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I agree for you that using the pump as an indicator of like the training quality, like did I target the muscle I wanted to? I think that's a good indicator. Yes, we found that regardless if the session consists of 7 or 21, no differences in that swelling or that pump. And I keep saying for since the when the whole thing started with the 52 weekly sets, like training people experiencing exercise inducing damage that lasts 48, 72 hours, inflating the measurements of hypertrophy is very unlikely. And the paper is pretty much confirming that it's very unlikely. So, and the whole thing again that was never discussion in my camp, the scientists camp. Like we were very comfortable that measuring things 48 hours after the last session, the training session, is enough time to measure the actual outcome and not have dealing with inflated measurement. That was never, we have been doing that for eons. There is a reason for that because we are measuring those things, we are studying those things. And again, I think that was I don't know, it was a lazy critique about people start to throwing things around to see what would stick. Oh, is damage, is edema, and using both interchangeably, which is completely different. And that's something we did that was, I think, was a good service for the paper, was explaining the differences there, explaining that yes, ultrasound cannot detect the difference, but the knowledge we gained allows us to make inferences whether you talk about swelling or damage. I think that's important. Now I'm seeing they are shifting to the intramuscular water, extracellular, MRI, ultrasound. They cannot separate extracellular water, which is true, but there is no physiological rationale that, think about that. The body fluid is strictly controlled by our nervous system. And now people are telling that when you do certain type of volume, that would shift that control, that high volume would draw more, because I'm assuming that if you talk about getting more water inside the muscle, that would be everything that's not myofibrillar content would increase. Like we talk about the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And sometimes people use a study by Mike Roberts and Cody Holm. And again, they studies one single group. They only got the high responders. They did a measurement. We don't know the arrow, the measurement arrow behind the measurement. The paper cannot be used to make inferences that higher volume will cause more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy than low volume, because there was no such comparison. And again, that was the study. They progressed from 10 to 30 weekly sets within 6 weeks. And they only got those people who responded. I forgot the cutoff they used. And again, the paper cannot be used to say that high volume causes more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. The other thing would be now the interstitial space, right? The space in between fibers would increase in water, and that's extracellular. So again, they keep throwing things around because like, oh, now it's water. So ultrasound and MRI cannot differentiate intra-extracellular water. That's correct. But what are you talking about it? Are you talking again that high volume causes more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy? No data whatsoever. Again, only one single group study, which we can't make that inference. Or that higher volume would cause an increase in interstitial space, the water in between, the space in between the fibers, that would make the whole muscle bigger, inflating. Again, at this point, there is no scientific or physiological rationale for higher volume shifting the intracellular water in such a way that would inflate hypertrophy measurements. And I even brought a study here. I love to always share that study. It's right here. So the study, if the listeners want to double check later, the PMIG is 256-03-897. PMIG 256-03-897. So volume is the way we look at exercise quantity, right? So we can hold everything constant and increase exercise quantity via sets, or we keep everything constant and you're going to increase volume via reps. So that study was untrained people. They were doing, let me pull up the study right here. They were doing 3 sessions per week. Decent volume for untrained was 12 weekly sets, pretty much. So the total was 4 sets per training session for biceps, 12 weekly sets to failure. So at 40%, and people would go crazy with fatigue and doing so many reps. So just to have an idea, let me zoom in. I'm getting old, man. I need to zoom in here. Okay. Just so I have an idea. So, and again, it was one arm, 40% of maximal strength, all sets to failure 3 times per week, traditional resistance training. The other arm with blood flow restriction. So what they found was that the number of total repetitions in traditional resistance training was 4,000 reps versus 1,000 reps. So the difference was huge for traditional, because if you go and I did studies, we published, we are the first to compare 20, 40, 60, 80% of maximal strength with an equated volume. When you did that study, was the same. The first rep, 40%, the first set, 150 reps. Yes, and again, if you do BFR, and that's one thing when you go, I always tell people, when you go low load, when you can't lift heavy, I would rather go with a BFR. That fatigue comes first. You don't keep doing reps endlessly. and that was the case. So again, the volume was totally different. It was 4,000 total reps versus 1,000. which was the condition that produced the greatest swelling? The one with a lower volume, the BFR, because the metabolite accumulation. So they found more swelling again, and that lasts for 48 hours in untrained people. Then they repeat it. They call habituated bout. They did like an accustomed bout, like the first session, 40%, one arm, all the way 4 sets to failure, 40% plus BFR. Way more swelling for 48 hours. They only measure all the way to 48 hours. I bet even 72 to be higher. So again, they measure pre, 0, 3 hours later, 24, 48. Again, greater swelling, the biggest swollen muscle for BFR that did 1,000 reps compared to 4,000 reps total. For the bout was fewer reps. Then they repeat it, Steve. When they repeat it, what happened with swelling? It went back 3 hours after the last bout was not different anymore. And guess what they estimate? And guess what they estimated here? Water content, muscle water content. What did they found? No differences in water content for the condition doing 4,000 reps versus 1,000 reps. So again, the data points to a different direction. And people try to do the exercise to come up, like I said, throwing ideas around to see what's going to stick. I love that paper because it shows that, like, even in untrained people, yes, when you do something you're not accustomed to, you got swollen for 48 hours. You keep repeating that. It subsides within 3 hours after the last training session. And that was just 6 weeks training, was not that long. So again, that subsides way faster when you get used to. And the condition that did 4 times more work, 4,000 reps versus 1, didn't grow more here because it was BFR versus traditional. Usually we know they're very similar when it comes to muscle growth. And when they estimated, they use MRI to estimate the muscle water content. No differences between the conditions. So again, it always goes back to the selective criticism, the paper people are getting to come up with their narratives. And I can't get attached to one specific paper. I need to see the whole body of literature to make my inferences or share my reasoning, how I see the data at this point. But yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah, it comes back to our discussion at the start there, doesn't it, really, in terms of social media, and people have a perception or they have a philosophy or they have a thought in mind, and they're going to find every which way to hold on to that and try and find holes in whatever you're doing. And the great thing with what you're doing there is you're not throwing out, hey, you even said, hey, we can't measure various aspects. That's true. But like when we dig into the kind of physiological rationale and we look at the body of evidence we have, it's more on the side of that not being a concern than it being a concern. And if they hear that and then they're still like, no, they find something else, right? They're always going to try and find something else. But you'd hope at least they'd accept that you've kind of moved it towards that not being a concern. And the power of the repeated bout effect, that's kind of crazy. And I guess trained lifters essentially are a repeated bout effect in a sense, whereas untrained, like you said, it's wild to think that it subsided so quickly. Yeah, it's a real thing for sure.
It's real. And even that paper was sharing here with untrained people doing crazy amount of reps, 12 sets per week to failure. Is a decent volume. A lot of high training people are doing this, right? 12 sets per week.
Especially biceps.
Yeah, only for biceps. Proportionally, it is way more work than 24 sets for quads, if you think about it, right?
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
So, but again, we get used to train individuals do experience muscle damage when they do something that's totally not accustomed to, is like way different from what they are doing. And even that cases, the magnitude of damage, we do have a data about that from one of the biggest researchers in muscle damage, Ken Osaka. He's from ECU in Australia. They compare with a train and train. Yes, the magnitude is way lower. Even when they do something they're not accustomed to, the magnitude of the damage is lower. But yeah, so going back to the paper, like when the paper came out, two critiques and that was people tagging me and people making videos like I'm not gonna engage here. I regret. Again, like I said, the my reasoning explanations can only go as far as the listening framework and cognition capacity allow them, and they don't want to listen. So the critique was, "Oh, it's only 13 people. That's a joke." And even people call me names. "Oh, Dr. De Souza is a clown. Is whatever." And like, what's people don't know me, and like, and again, 13 people in that type of design, you get way more power. If you ask me, Edu, would you rather do the study, the same intervention with 39 people, like a between group design, 39, 13 per condition, or would you prefer 13 total and each one undergoing the same condition? 13, 100%.
Yeah.
I get more power. I get more statistical power. I get less noise because instead of comparing Edu with Steve, I'm comparing Steve with Steve performing the same things. But people don't know that, or they don't want to know, or don't want to listen that. And the second critique was and that's I take full responsibility. The second critique was the post hoc power analysis. And so many people try, and again, was a poor word choice on my end. I always can pull up, right? Yeah, I'm not a native English speaker, my second language, whatever. But what we actually did was a sensitivity analysis. We didn't do that analysis to reinterpret the findings after the fact or rescue the results. We did it simply to ask, given the study variability and the statistical model used, what magnitude of effect would this study be realistically able to detect? That was the last thing I did. The paper was written. And then yeah, I know, I saw that coming. People are going to talk about, 13 people only. And that's the effect you want to detect. We did a sensitivity analysis by Lakens, if you're going to assume. And I was the one doing the first draft, and was pretty much Allison and I was that statistical part. I was someone like my mentor and the co-author. We blinded him, so when we did the statistical analysis, he didn't know the groups, the interventions. Like was CGE. He didn't know which one was which. We also blind him for time. He didn't know what was pre, immediate post, 24. We blinded him for everything. Then when I got the statistical analysis, I wrote the results. Alison was that we were writing together. And again, those are two critiques. They're not valid because I did not use post hoc analysis. Yes, that was the terminology I wrote, which was bad, but it does not invalidate. And people got that to invalidate the paper. Again, it would be a problem if I would try to make a new interpretation of the findings after the fact or trying to rescue the results after doing the post hoc. We didn't. It was basically to ask, given the study variability, the statistical model used, what magnitude of effect would this study be realistic able to detect? This is it. The last thing we did. Boom. But as you keep saying, right, in social media, people pick the part to and start to make joke and be dismissive with information. And I was like, I can't get into in those discussions. It's waste
Yeah.
of my time and energy.
For sure. Yeah, it's tough because It's kind of like your baby. It's your science. It's saying you want people to interpret it properly. And then when people are, and then maybe not understanding things, like I get it. People see 13 and that's not many people, but then they don't really understand the fact that, hey, if everyone's their own control, that means, like you said, you're comparing Steve versus Steve. There isn't genetics involved, sleep, environment, diet, like that all gets taken care of because it's the same person. And suddenly, it's much more statistically powerful than they realized. But if they're not going to hear you out on that, they see 13, it's less than, I don't know what number it needed to be acceptable.
Yeah. And just one example how selective and biased they are. When we have one guy who became famous for doing infographics in our field, and when the guy shared the infographics telling that swelling does not return within 48 hours. So in that study, they did the 2 muscle measurements, and he omitted one measurement. He didn't say anything about statistical difference. And that study had actually 14 people. But in that case, it worked to convey certain narrative. So again, it is, and like you said, it's my baby. But in that case, I would be such a bad parent because I'm not attached to my papers and findings at all. The data stands. The data is the data. This is it. I think I told you every study in high volume chronic, I thought we would find a better effect for higher volume. So again, we, for the 52 weekly sets paper, actually few, and that's another problem, right, Steve? Actually, very few people read the papers. And out of that very few, even a handful of people might be able to understand what was done, to be honest. And there is a reason we have been studying that for 2 decades, reading, measuring those things for 2 decades, right? And again, even the 52 weekly sets paper, there was no statistical differences between the conditions. The group that ended up with a 52, the group that ended up with a 42 and 22, and people got the point of estimate because the magnitude, the raw change was larger for the 52, but we also present uncertainty, and we said that in the paper. Yeah, it might produce a slight advantage, but uncertainty is high. But again, and people start to repeat that higher volume is better after the paper, and then the other side of the camp start to say it's all edema, it's all swelling, and here we are with the. I don't know if we're advancing that discussion sometimes. I don't know.
I was trying to think of a comparison or an analogy, and it feels like politics. You could probably dig one out there. It's very much like politics, really.
Exactly. It's like so polarized, so divided, and people like, no, I don't want to. I'm still thinking that volume is 1, 2 in a box. This is it. And I think I said that. I don't remember if I said that the last 2 times, but something we all agree at this point, it might change down the line, is that multiple sets are better than single sets. I think that's something we can say we all agree. Do you have a data? And again, the older studies, we keep evolving as a field. Our field is still problematic. We are getting better, way much better than 10 years ago. I'm thinking I'm way better researcher compared to 10 years ago, but I'm still think I have a long way to go to evolve and improve. But if you consider older studies and all the problems that come with older studies, and so many older studies, I like to say a good study never gets old. A well-designed study never gets old, in my opinion. But if you consider all the problems with the older studies, you're gonna say that multiple sets usually are better than single sets. And I don't recall any study like a within participant comparing single to multiple sets. We had one in untrained people. The sample size is quite large, 42 people. I didn't find differences between multiple and single sets. But again, it's one study. That's another thing that people need to keep in mind. One study only does not carry the weight to change practical application. one study only cannot answer all the research questions, and one study cannot answer the question you wanted that study to answer. So sometimes the people are approaching studying the way that, no, that was not the question they sought to answer. So I think the only thing we agree, like I was saying, multiple sets at this point are better than single set. I do believe that there is a logarithmic pattern that the gains are more steeper with, depending on the volume you are doing, with a diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And I already shared that. I think that 2% cutoff value or threshold used by Palant is too optimistic, in my opinion. And if you use 2% as a minimal detectable difference, or the point there is no meaningful gains after 30, we don't see any meaningful gains anymore. If you assume the 2% cutoff they establish, again, that's from a different data set. If you look their data set and you calculate minimal detectable difference for each study, because I know all those studies they have a measurement error, in my opinion, above 2%. So again, I know they got data, because if the point is like that, people assume that in meta-analysis, each study will cancel each other because measurement error is only random. And like I said, measurement error, especially in the labs that we do in a very specialized way, measurement error can be systematic. And I think that's something we need to advance, in my opinion. How are we gonna incorporate measurement error for each meta-analysis you are doing? And again, I agree that maybe 15 sets per week would be way better than, my point's like this. 15 weekly sets would be way better than 7. When you go for 15 to 25, I don't know if that difference is meaningful anymore. If I could stick to Palant, I would say after 30, no meaningful gains. But again, a meta-analysis is only good as the studies that they included. We still need to involve as a field, and counting the fractional counting compared to direct. So that's something we have not strong data whatsoever to, how much you're gonna count? Are you gonna count fractional? Is 0.5 out of the outcome produced, or 0.5 out of the stimulus provide? I have no idea. So those are the things. And again, when it comes to studying volume, we also study volume in very specific ways. Traditional straight sets only. Only one muscle at a time, right? We are studying what is a specialization phase, only traditional straight sets, with a 90% of the literature coming from 3 muscle groups: quads, elbow flexor, elbow extensors. The duration of those studies also are very short, right? The longest we see is 12 weeks. I was on the call before talking to you. We have a paper. I'm not going to spoil, but that makes you probably invite me again once we publish that. We have in a population that's very susceptible to muscle damage, is trained older women. They are trained, but they're older population. 6 years old on average. I could pull up here, but I'm not going to do that. But again, we are in the second round, and I always tell people I work with, we don't rush coffee, we don't rush papers. Let's make the best as we can do. We don't rush the things here. In the projects I'm working with, I don't like to rush the things. So we did a study for 12 weeks, intra-subject design. We have a multiple measurements of hypertrophy for 12 weeks. Each leg doing 18 sets already. And they came from those outreach university programs. They're already training with us. So but like, let's do 12 weeks, standardized volume, each leg doing 18. What we did after that, another 12 weeks. one leg kept 18, the other double, 36. And we did for another 12 weeks. So we have a 24 weeks study.
Very
The only
cool.
thing I can spoil that echo intensity does not indicate it whatsoever damage or anything that's not actual hypertrophy, because we measure multiple times hypertrophy, echo intensity, and strength. So again, and I think that the studies that accounted for the previous training volume, they tell a different story. And at this point, we don't have enough studies to run a meta-analysis only with let's put a inclusion criteria, only studies that accounted for previous training volume. The story looks different in my perspective. And I think that's something you are much better. When we have a different perspectives, we're going to focus on the merit of information, not attacking people. I have so much respect for Zurdo's lab, Schoenfeld's lab, people in Brazil, they do great stuff as well. I'm from Brazil, from one of the labs that probably did the huge contribution to this field as well. I think my lab is doing something, especially for training people in the last 10 years. I don't share similar perspective in certain topics, but we respect each other and we focus on the map. We can hang out, have a beer, a wine, and share different perspectives, focusing on the merit of information, not attacking people or not trying to be dismissive with information. I think that's something I know because the way you are trained. But again, I think when you communicate high volume, being better, we need way more nuance there. The way you are doing, the conditions you are investigating, the studies, and that's something that I understand why the other camp get mad or gets upset about it, because I see the lack of nuance when people are communicating high volume is better, do it, and you gain more. It's my
Yeah.
perspective.
Oh no, it's the issue with like short form content essentially is because that as a standalone take home, when you really zoom out and you just summarize it as shortly as possible, could be an acceptable thing. But but it has to come from the understanding of all the things you just mentioned there, with all the limitations within the research, where like one of them, like you said, some muscles haven't even been examined, let alone then the time course and all these other aspects. And I guess you can only use what you have available, and then you kind of draw, like, you can't draw large generalizations from that. And that's where some people get a bit too excited with it, I think. And it's interesting to hear that you mentioned there, obviously, the Pelland analysis. They have a lot of data, similar to like having a lot of weigh-ins, and there's like differences day to day, and you smooth it out to try and like get rid of the errors where you can, or kind of make it a little bit of higher quality. But the error rate could be higher than their kind of 2% that you mentioned, which it sounds like if you had it at a higher 3-4%, it'll just shift everything down a little bit, which is what you're kind of saying.
Like that the point of diminishing returns instead of 30 would be by 20, for example.
Yeah.
And I think it might be something like that. Again, it's I think that meta-analysis provided like a huge contribution. But I think most of meta-analysis in our field, they are still exploratory. They are not, I said that so many times, it's not a definitive answer about any topic. It's opportunity to look at the literature. Where can you go after this? How can we improve after this or after this meta-analysis? Because again, like if you remember from their meta-analysis, they ran several different models. They try the direct, the indirect, both combined. For hypertrophy, the best model fit was the indirect, the fractional counting. For the strength, it wasn't. So I again, it's still exploratory. The data holds, and again, the statistical analysis is very robust. But I see especially because the way we still conducting and doing studies, any meta-analysis at this point, in my opinion, is very exploratory rather than a definitive answer about any topic. I keep saying that is in my perspective as well. I understand the strengths of a meta-analysis compared to single randomized control trials, but we're still exploring the things, and that discussion about high, low, like I said, I think we're still scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
And even
And
like, if you go back to, you're waiting for I know you talked to Josh, we are waiting for the MyoReps paper to come out. Uh, if you think about volume load, sets times reps times load, MyoReps did way less. Same
yeah,
hypertrophy. So again, what about those time efficient techniques? That's why I was pointed out. We have been studying volume under very specific circumstances. We can't
yeah.
generalize the things beyond those circumstances at this point.
Yeah, the episode with Josh will come out probably the week before this one. So that will be live when people are tuning into this. And yeah, the volume load was like 30, 40, in around there,
Way
percent
lower.
less. And time was like half the amount of time needed. So those things, especially if you're trying to do lots of volume, time efficient
And
techniques are
again,
very helpful.
I probably he talk about that, like how long can you sustain that? Because it was
Yep.
very intense. Again, like for some reason, when life hits, you don't have too much time to work out. That's another tool in a box, right?
Yeah.
You can use that for searching period of time, get your gains. But if it was 12, 16 weeks or the study you are doing with a 24, I don't know if they would sustain that because it is intense. Nice to in the
It's,
box, but to be
yeah.
used at very specific moments and conditions.
And sustainability of a program is absolutely huge because if you're having to deload every month because the volume is just so high, where you could average out higher volumes that are maybe less high on average, but on the long term, like on a single week, say, or you don't peak as high, sorry, but your average volume could be higher across the year if it's sustainable, recoverable. And then again, like a hard set is a great way of thinking about volume, but it's like you said, are you doing a leg extension or a squat or like a hip hinge versus a lying leg curl? Like, how are we counting that? It's very challenging, and different,
Yeah.
even different machines, different people can kind of respond to that differently. So I think you'd agree with actually the way you put it in terms of meta-analyses being exploratory. It's a case of we have these general recommendations, and probably meta-analyses are a great place to draw those from because they're some of the strongest evidence, but it's just a general recommendation. You now have to, it might give you some bumpers to work within, but now you work within the bumpers with yourself or your clients.
No, I agree. And again, like you said, the way we do the things is not to tell people what to do at the gym, right? It's just to guide people that you have all those options, right? And ultimately, like, how long did you take to figure out the best workout for yourself, Steve?
Yeah, it takes you. I mean, I'm still learning every week, every session you learn, right?
Try and error.
Yeah,
And again, like, and I don't think that high volume is a useless or something people would say like, no, that's all edema is useless. You're not smart if you're doing more. Hey, sometimes it's the way that gonna push people to do more sets close to failure.
yeah,
And again, like, if you ask any pro athlete, like, even how long did you take to figure out the best warm up before competition? They're gonna tell you like probably a decade, or I'm still figuring it out. So it's like I think you're, like I said, evolving and getting better as a field, providing general guidelines and recommendations. And that's another thing that people approaching the weird way, in my opinion. If A is not different from B, they're gonna pick the one they don't like. That's useless. No, man, that means you have a more options. You have a more tools in your toolbox, right? That when work for clients, like, I can you working with different advanced techniques, different volume ranges, rep ranges, right? Because I think it was Derek, he was with you a while ago. Like, I don't know, Derek, the from he published the paper about.
the
Oh,
isometrics at long muscle lengths.
no, it was not. That was, oh man. Let me see.
Oh, that was Dorian. Sorry, I'm.
Yeah, that was. What is Derek? Oh man, let me
I
see.
should
I'm
remember as well.
so bad with names. Derek Van Avery. He's a PhD
Yes.
student with Stuart Phillips.
We're talking about the pump and how useless it is.
He did a paper, yeah, the
Yes.
review, yeah. He has. I stole the. He said like hypertrophy is the most given adaptation, and I love it because man,
Very
high
forgiving, yeah.
low, high low reps, machines free weights, fast slower tempo, uh, traditional advanced technique. There's so many options.
Yeah.
Use that in your favor instead of categorizing, right? Dichotomizing, like this is good, this is bad. No, man, those are options, right? I think
Yeah.
as a evidence-based practitioner, that should be the approach. Like, hey, those are all tools in my toolbox, and depend on each case, right? And try and error to figure out what works best to for you, for your clients, and so on and so forth. Yes.
Yeah, really well said. I think it's unfortunate. I was thinking why people are really drawn to meta-analyses, especially maybe even evidence, people who would quote themselves as evidence-based, is because it's the strongest form of evidence. So they then hold on to that like, oh, it's the answer.
Yeah.
And people, even if they're evidence-based, they love kind of certainty and almost black and white answers. So a lot of the time people like to put themselves in a box and be like, okay, so high
Yeah.
reps, they're just as good as low reps, but I like low reps, so I'm going to go with low reps only. But what happens if low reps injure you, or it's lockdown and you've only got bands at home, like you're not going to be able to do low reps, then it becomes a tool. And it's exactly as you said, hypertrophy is so forgiving and you have so many tools in your toolbox. If anything, it just makes it more interesting and fun when it takes a long time to grow a lot of muscle.
Yeah, no, and again, like going back to meta-analysis, there was a paper from 2018. I think Murad. It's always hard to pronounce other people's name, but I love his model because in the traditional evidence-based practice model, the pyramid, the meta-analysis, they are sitting at the top. And his model was pretty cool in the paper. They chopped off the meta-analysis from the top and used the meta-analysis as lens to evaluate the literature. And I think this is it. Like I said, every meta-analysis is opportunity to evaluate the body of the literature and see how can we expand up to the point the meta-analysis was published. I love the model because meta-analysis, they have a problems, especially in our field. There was another paper showing that more than 80% of a meta-analysis, they have a statistical issues. But yeah, but again, I try to approach in the more kind of not taking sides, like it's understanding the pros and the cons of each piece of evidence, each type of design, and how can we improve the field. Ultimately, I think we all got into this because we love the lifting weights. We love growing muscle. We love being stronger. For me now, again is a mental. I'm turning 50 in August. Like man, I gotta keep my muscles, keep working out. The kids are getting faster, stronger. I'm working out for them. It's getting harder and harder. So
Yeah.
it's a different priority. But I love hitting the weights, throw some big weights up. So that's something. And again, when approaching the evidence, be open minded and understanding the pros and cons for each of those, and the type of inferences can be drawn for each type of evidence, not picking sides or this is good, this is the best, this is the worst, this is useless, that's the best thing for you. I don't
Yeah.
like that approach.
Yeah, I love your philosophy surrounding the research and how you're not attached to a certain outcome. You just take it as it is and you report it. And that was very clear through this. And it's nice from our discussion that at least people have even more confidence in the evidence that's been reported in terms of the muscle measurements not being kind of confounded by any swelling or edema or muscle damage. And so that helps because that would, cause a lot of disruption throughout the space, and it aligns with the rest of the literature that has looked
I
at
would,
this, as
I
you
would,
suggested too.
I would say that our findings aligns with the rest of the literature, aligns for previous studies from my lab as well. The only difference, we are the first to only manipulate volume, holding out the rest constant. I think that was the first to do that. But yes, it's not or data does not stand out the literature. It aligns with the previous findings from my lab and other people, especially in trained individuals.
Yeah.
Another important thing, like pay attention when someone is sharing an infographic with untrained people or trained people, or using a paper to convey a point. It's always complicated when you're picking a paper to convey a point, or using one paper to make practical recommendation is always tricky.
Yeah, very well said. Eduardo, it's always great chatting to you, and it sounds like you're going to have a very exciting paper coming out in the near future that we're going to have to talk about again. If
Yeah, for
people want to
sure.
keep up to date with you, Eduardo, where should they head? And I also wanted to say, I believe you've got a bridging the gap between research and real world application, which is a lot of what we've been talking about here, actually, with Chris Barakat coming up at your university.
Yes,
People can still get involved with that.
Yes, we're gonna be holding in person. I think we need more in person after pandemic.
Agreed.
Everything is an in person seminar here at UT in June. I can't share the bad with the dates, but in June, I think it's the week before World Cup starts. Pretty much, I think it's the
I don't
14th or
even know
yes,
that. Yeah.
something like that. So a lot of people come in US. It's gonna be in person. We're gonna talk a lot about evidence-based practice, how to interpret research and apply research. That's gonna be pretty much my part. Chris is gonna talk a lot about natural bodybuilding prep. And we're also going to be holding lab sessions. You're going to see how can you measure your muscle size with an ultrasound, how we can measure your body composition with a DEXA, muscle activity. So yes, we are pretty excited. We still have seats open. So if someone is interested in enjoying and visiting Tampa, which is beautiful, it's going to be hot. But we have so much water and nice place to go surround the university, which is a beautiful campus as well. Yes, we are pretty excited. My partner in crime, Chris Barakat, and we are holding seminar here at UT. If you want to learn more about evidence-based practice, how interpret research, applied research, natural body build prep, measurements, the difference between measurements and how can you use those measurements to track our progress, to understand better research. That's the goal of the seminar.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll make sure that that's linked in the description as well so people can get hold of that, and your
Appreciate that.
Instagram will be there too. I know you said your goal is to not add more noise to the industry, but cut through it. And I feel like that is a great way to put it. So thank
Yeah.
you so much, Eduardo, again for your work. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you, man. Thanks again. Appreciate it.